In the vast, humming expanse of the Galactic Sociological Research Hub, nestled within the crystalline spires of Epsilon Eridani's orbital station in the year 3033 CE, Professor Kelneth adjusted the neural interface on his scaled forehead. The hub was a marvel of interstellar architecture, a colossal ring of translucent alloys that orbited a gas giant, its corridors alive with the soft glow of holographic data streams and the murmur of 1,000 alien tongues. Kelneth, a towering reptilian from the Zorathian collective, felt the familiar thrum of the station's artificial gravity beneath his clawed feet, a constant reminder of the ordered universe he had dedicated his life to understanding. His third-person limited view filtered everything through his analytical mind: the cool, sterile air scented with ozone from the recyclers, the distant hum of quantum processors crunching eons of data, and the subtle vibration of incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. He paced the observation deck, his tail swishing thoughtfully against the polished floor. The deck overlooked a holographic projection of the Milky Way, where pinpoints of light represented civilizations, each one catalogued, predicted, and neatly filed in the Grand Archive. But one cluster of stars burned brighter in his thoughts: the Sol system, home to humanity. For cycles now, Kelneth had led the xenology team studying this peculiar species. Humans, with their short lifespans and chaotic histories, defied every model. His latest report, compiled from petabytes of intercepted broadcasts, archaeological digs on Terra, and clandestine observations, had just concluded. Humanity embodied entropy itself, disorder, randomness, the unraveling of structure. And yet, inexplicably, creation flourished in their wake. Kelneth's slit-pupiled eyes narrowed as he summoned the holographic summary. "Display primary findings," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that echoed in the empty chamber. The air shimmered and words materialized. Humanity, agents of entropy. Recommendation: quarantine to prevent galactic destabilization. But as he read, a nagging doubt crept in, a feeling he couldn't quantify, like an equation with an unresolved variable. Why did civilizations that brushed against humans advance so rapidly? The Zorathians themselves had stagnated for millennia until a chance encounter with a human probe sparked innovations in quantum entanglement. Was it coincidence? He recalled the first human artifact his team analyzed, a Voyager probe, drifting through the void like a message in a bottle. Its golden record, etched with sounds and images from Earth, had baffled them. Music that evoked strange emotions, diagrams of anatomy that hinted at vulnerability, and greetings in languages born of conflict and cooperation. Kelneth had felt an odd stirring then, a whisper of something greater ordering the chaos, but he dismissed it as fatigue. Now, as lead xenologist, he bore the weight of the Council's expectations. The Galactic Council, a consortium of elder races, relied on his categorizations to maintain harmony. Humans were an anomaly, unpredictable, emotional, driven by impulses that shattered predictive algorithms. Kelneth's internal conflict simmered. Intellectually, he saw them as a threat. Emotionally, he envied their fire. His own people, the Zorathians, prized logic above all, their society a perfect lattice of roles and rituals. Emotions were regulated, faith in the cosmos reduced to mathematical probabilities. Yet watching human archives, he saw beings who laughed in the face of oblivion, who built empires from ruins. A soft chime interrupted his reverie, the arrival of his assistant, Luravex, a slender avian from the Etherian flock. She glided in on iridescent wings, her beak clicking in greeting. "Professor, the latest data burst from Terra's networks. It's erratic." Kelneth turned, his scales rippling under the lights. "Show me." The hologram shifted to display fragmented feeds, humans in crowded cities protesting against unseen oppressors, scientists in labs unraveling genetic codes, artists painting visions of stars they had yet to reach. Amid the chaos, a clip caught his eye, a group of humans huddled in a storm-ravaged shelter, sharing stories and songs. One, an elderly male, bowed his head and murmured words that the translator rendered as prayer. Kelneth paused the feed. "What is this ritual? They invoke an unseen entity." Luravex tilted her head. "They call it faith, Professor, a belief in a higher power despite evidence to the contrary. It's inefficient, yet it binds them." Kelneth felt a twinge. Inefficient, yes, but perhaps essential. His research aimed to categorize humans as a galactic anomaly, something to be isolated. But the data suggested otherwise. Every civilization that contacted humanity evolved faster. The insectoid hivemind of Alpha Centauri developed individuality after trading with human merchants. The ethereal plasmoids of Sirius gained corporeal forms through human-inspired engineering. Chaos bred progress. He leaned closer to the hologram, his breath fogging the projection. The human's world was a tapestry of contradictions, wars that birthed peace treaties, disasters that forged alliances. In one feed, a human astronaut floated in space, repairing a satellite amid solar flares. The risk was insane. Zorathians would have sent drones. But the human succeeded, and in his transmission home he whispered, "This can't just be an accident. Someone's watching over us." Kelnath froze. That sentiment echoed in his own unspoken thoughts. The universe, vast and indifferent, yet patterned with such precision that it hinted at design. He shook it off. Superstition had no place in science. Prepare the simulation, he ordered Luravex. I need to model human integration scenarios. As she departed, Kelnath stared at the stars beyond the viewport. The hub's orbit brought them into view, a sea of twinkling lights, each a potential story of order disrupted. Humans with their entropy were the wildcard. His conflict deepened. Classify them as dangerous or recognize their role. The council demanded answers, but doubt gnawed at him. Hours blurred into the artificial night cycle. Kelnath immersed himself in the data vault, a chamber lined with neural pods where researchers could interface directly with the archive. He connected, his mind flooding with human history, the fall of empires, the rise of technologies, moments of sheer defiance. One event stood out, the Apollo missions. Primitive rockets hurling fragile beings to the moon, driven by dreams rather than necessity. The commander, upon landing, had said, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Kelnath felt a surge of admiration, relentless ingenuity, but the simulation results were grim. Integrating humans led to unpredictable outcomes. Alliances fractured, innovations surged, but at the cost of stability. Entropy incarnate, yet in every model, growth followed disruption. Kelnath disconnected, rubbing his temples. From chaos comes meaning, he murmured, the theme crystallizing in his mind. Alert pinged, unauthorized transmission from a human outpost. Curious, he accessed it, a broadcast from a colony ship, the Endurance, venturing into uncharted space. The captain, a weathered male named Elias Thorne, addressed his crew. We're out here because we believe there's more, not just stars but purpose. Hold fast, the divine doesn't abandon the bold. Kelnath's scales prickled. Divine, humans wove such notions into their chaos, finding order in faith. He wondered if that was the key, their entropy tempered by belief in something greater. As the hub's lights dimmed for rest cycle, Kelnath lingered, gazing at the hologram of Earth. Blue and green, swirling with storms, beautiful in its disorder. His research was meant to contain them, but perhaps the galaxy needed their spark. Rising tension built as reports flooded in. Another civilization, the Crystalline Shard Collective, had encountered a human explorer. Instead of conflict, they exchanged knowledge, accelerating the shard's evolution from static forms to adaptive ones. Kelnath's team buzzed with debate. Anomaly or catalyst? Luravex asked. Catalyst, Kelnath whispered, the twist dawning. Chaos wasn't destruction, it was evolution. But the council wouldn't see it that way. They feared change. Kelnath's internal conflict peaked. He must present his findings, risking his career. In the quiet, he recalled a human poem from the archives. Do not go gentle into that good night. Defiance, empathy, ingenuity. As he prepared his address, a subtle sense of vast intelligence brushed his mind, like the universe breathing meaning into the void. Not luck, but design. The hub's alarms blared suddenly, a human vessel approaching the station, uninvited. Kelnath's heart raced. Contact was forbidden, yet here they came, embodying the chaos he studied. And in that moment, he knew the real study was just beginning. Professor Kelnath stood frozen on the observation deck as the alarms wailed, their piercing tone cutting through the hub's serene hum like a blade through silk. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting the incoming vessel, a sleek, angular ship of human design, its hull scarred from cosmic debris, engines glowing with improvised fusion tech. The Endurance, the same colony ship from the intercepted broadcast. How had they found the hub? The station was cloaked in subspace distortions, invisible to primitive sensors. Yet here they were, defying logic once more. Kelnath's mind raced, his third-person limited perspective narrowing to the pounding of his pulse in his temples. The cool air now felt charged, heavy with the scent of recycled oxygen and faint ozone from overloading systems. He could taste the metallic tang of fear, his own, unbidden and illogical. Zorathians didn't panic, they calculated, but humans. They thrived on the unexpected. Luravex, he barked into his communicator, his voice steady despite the turmoil. Seal the docks, alert the council. Her response crackled back, avian chirps underscoring her words. Professor, they're hailing us. No weapons detected. They claim peaceful intent. Peaceful, Kelnath's tail lashed. Humans' history was rife with peaceful explorations that spiraled into upheaval. He moved to the command console, claws tapping commands to enhance the visual. The ship loomed larger, its name etched in bold letters, Endurance. Fitting, he thought, humans endured where others faltered. The hail connected, and a human face appeared in hologram. Captain Elias Thorne, his features rugged, eyes sharp with determination. Gray streaked his hair, lines of experience etching his skin like maps of battles won. This is Captain Thorne of the United Earth Vessel Endurance. We come seeking knowledge, not conflict. Your station's emissions match patterns we've studied for years. Let's talk, Kelnath hesitated. Protocol demanded isolation, but curiosity, the same drive that made humans anomalies, stirred in him. This is Professor Kelnath of the Galactic Sociological Research Hub. Your presence violates interstellar accords. Depart immediately. Thorn's lips curved in a wry smile, a human expression of defiance Kelneth had catalogued countless times. Accords we weren't part of. Professor, we've traveled light years on faith and ingenuity. Give us a chance to prove we're not the monsters your data paints us as. Faith, there it was again. Kelneth felt that subtle brush of something vast, like the universe aligning threads of fate. He glanced at the stars, their light filtering through the viewport, and wondered if this encounter was random or orchestrated. Against his better judgment, he signaled docking clearance. Limited access, one representative only. As the ship berthed, the hub's corridors filled with security drones, their red eyes scanning for threats. Kelneth met Thorn at the airlock, Luravex at his side. The human stepped through, clad in a worn spacesuit, carrying no weapons but a datapad. Up close, he exuded a quiet strength, broad shoulders, steady gaze, the faint scent of synthetic leather and sweat. Professor, Thorn said, extending a hand. Kelneth knew the gesture from archives, a human ritual of trust. He reciprocated awkwardly, his scaled palm engulfing the human's. What brings you here, Captain? Kelneth asked, leading them to a conference chamber. The room was sparse, walls projecting calming nebulae, but tension hung thick. Thorn sat, his posture relaxed yet alert. We're explorers, our colony world's failing resources depleted. We detected your signals, pieced together you're studying us, figured it's time for direct input. Kelneth's internal conflict flared. Humans, desperate survivors, turning chaos into opportunity. Your species is under observation due to your entropic nature. You disrupt equilibria. Thorn chuckled, a sound rich with emotion. Entropy, you mean change. Yeah, we're good at that, but look closer, from our messes come breakthroughs. Medicine from wars, unity from disasters. As they talked, Kelneth delved deeper. Thorn shared stories, Earth's climate crises forcing green tech revolutions, pandemics birthing global cooperation. Each tale highlighted human will, courage in adversity, creativity in scarcity. Luravex interjected, but your conflicts, billions lost. How do you justify the cost? Thorn's eyes softened, a flicker of pain. We don't. We mourn, learn, push forward. It's not luck, it's believing there's meaning in the struggle. Like when my ship nearly tore apart in a wormhole, we survived. Someone wanted us to. Kelneth leaned forward, intrigued. This someone, you're divine, Thorn nodded. Call it God, the universe, whatever. It's the order in chaos, keeps us going. The conversation stretched, Thorn's words painting humans as relentless empathizers. Kelneth saw parallels, his own doubt mirroring human faith. Rising tension mounted as council representatives arrived via hologram demanding quarantine. But Thorn's presence sparked change. Hub systems glitched, adapting to human code integrations he casually suggested. Evolution in real time. As the meeting ended, Kelneth escorted Thorn back. Your chaos, it fosters growth. Thorn grinned. That's the point. Universe needs shaking up. In the quiet after, Kelneth pondered. Humans answered the call to chaos, but with purpose. A subtle mercy in their survival hinted at divine justice. Then alarms blared again, more human ships on approach, drawn by Endurance's signal. Kelneth's world tilted. The anomaly was spreading. Professor Kelneth watched from the command bridge as the new human vessels emerged from hyperspace, their formations haphazard yet purposeful, a fleet of mismatched colony ships, freighters, and scouts, all bearing the scars of long voyages. The hub sensors lit up with warnings, the air thick with the acrid smell of overheating circuits as defenses primed. His mind, focused through third-person limited lens, churned with calculations, probabilities of conflict, vectors of influence. The stars outside seemed to mock him, their eternal patterns disrupted by these interlopers. Professor, the council orders immediate repulsion, Luravex said, her wings fluttering nervously. They're classifying this as an invasion. Kelneth's claws dug into the console. Invasion? Thorn had called it migration, humans fleeing a dying star system, seeking new homes. But the council saw only entropy. He glanced at Thorn, still aboard, now under guard in a holding lounge. The human's calm demeanor irked and inspired him. Open a channel to the lead ship, Kelneth commanded. A female human appeared, her voice firm. This is Commander Reyes of the Exodus Fleet. Captain Thorn's signal guided us. We seek asylum, not war. Kelneth felt the weight of decision. His research flashed before him, civilizations accelerating post-human contact. The Shard Collective's adaptation, the hive mind's individuality, all ripples from humanity's touch. Stand down, he told security. Allow docking under supervision. The council's hologram erupted in protest, but Kelneth muted them. Internal conflict raged. He was defying order for the sake of understanding. As humans disembarked, the hub transformed. Engineers tinkered with systems, suggesting fixes that bypassed protocols. Scientists shared data, sparking debates. Kelneth observed a human medic treating a wounded Zorathian with improvised nanites, empathy shining in her eyes. Thorn joined him. See, we bring solutions, not just problems. Kelneth nodded, sensing the twist, chaos is evolution's engine. But tension rose, council forces en route. Humans prayed in groups, their faith a quiet force. One night, Kelneth overheard a human, not luck, someone's got our back. The divine felt natural, vast. Then the council fleet arrived, weapons hot. Kelneth stood ready. The clash was imminent. The council fleet hung above the ring like a necklace of obsidian blades, each cruiser a perfect, lethal geometry that reflected the gas giant storm bands in cold crimson. Professor Kelneth stood on the primary observation blister, the transparent dome curving over him so completely that it felt as though he floated in open space. The only thing separating him from hard vacuum was a finger width of smart crystal, and yet the greater pressure came from inside his own skull. His pulse thudded against the scales of his throat. His tail, usually a metronome of calm deliberation, lashed once hard enough to crack against the deck plating. Below him, the hub's defense grid painted the void in thin, angry lines of violet particle fire. Warning shots. The council still pretended this was negotiation. Luravex's voice crackled over the private channel, thin with avian panic. Professor, High Arbiter Vexar demands immediate surrender of all human personnel. He has authorized kinetic lances if we refuse within the next 4 minutes. 4 minutes. 4 minutes until the ordered universe he had spent his life cataloging tore itself apart because of a species that refused to stay in its box. Kelnath's claws curled against the railing. He tasted copper. He had bitten the inside of his cheek without noticing. Through the blister's audio feed, he could hear the humans now shouted orders, laughter edged with terror, the low murmur of someone singing under their breath. They were rigging barricades out of cafeteria tables and coolant pipes. They were turning the hub's own maintenance drones into improvised mines. They were doing the impossible the way they always did, quickly, messily, and with a stubborn joy that made no mathematical sense. He closed his eyes and saw the simulation again, the one he had run 1,000 times. Quarantine humanity, galactic growth plateaus within 8 centuries. Integrate humanity, volatility spikes, then an explosion of progress that rewrote the predictive curves into something almost beautiful, almost like music, a soft chime. Captain Elias Thorne stepped onto the blister, boots magnet locked to the deck, helmet tucked under one arm. His face was streaked with soot from a plasma burn on level 7, but his eyes were bright, alive, infuriatingly calm. "They're giving us 4 minutes, Kelneth said without turning. 4 minutes is generous, Thorne answered. Back on Earth, we once evacuated a whole city in 90 seconds when the dam broke. 4 minutes, we can throw a party. Kelneth hissed, a sound that among Zorathians passed for bitter laughter. This is not a dam, Captain. This is the combined fleet of 12 elder species. They have weapons that unmake molecular bonds across cubic kilometers. You cannot improvise your way out of annihilation. Thorne stepped beside him and looked out at the fleet. For a long moment he was quiet, and when he spoke his voice was lower, stripped of bravado. You ever lose someone you couldn't save, Professor? The question struck like a claw to an old scar. Kelnath's mate lost cycles ago to a containment breach he had calculated as 0.0004% probable. He had run the numbers afterward until his mind bled. Probability had not cared. Yes, he said. Then you know what it feels like when the universe hands you a bill you can't pay with logic. Thorne tapped the glass, pointing to a tiny flare on one of the human freighters. See that? That's Martinez welding a railgun mount onto a cargo hauler with nothing but prayer and a plasma torch. He's 23, has a daughter he's never met because she was born after we left Sol. He's singing her lullaby right now over the open channel so she'll know his voice if we all die. Kelnath felt something fracture inside his chest, something that had been welded shut since the day he stood in a silent decontamination chamber and watched a body bag float away. Thorne continued softer. We don't fight because we think we'll win clean, Professor. We fight because surrendering means admitting the story ends here, and some of us believe the author isn't done writing yet. Author, the human word for the quiet intelligence Kelnath had always sensed behind the equations but never dared name. A new voice cut across the command net, Commander Reyes from the Exodus fleet. All ships, this is Reyes. On my mark, we execute Plan Lazarus. I want every crazy, half-assed, beautiful idea you've got, because if we're going to burn, we burn bright. Kelnath's tail stilled. Plan Lazarus. He had read the brief. Humans intended to overload their warp cores in a chained cascade, turning the entire migrant fleet into a directed EMP that would blind the council sensors for exactly 37 seconds. 37 seconds of chaos. 37 seconds in which the hub's defenses might tip the balance. It was suicide wrapped in hope. It was the most human thing he had ever seen. He opened a station-wide channel. Every speaker, every comm implant, every drifting drone heard his next words. This is Professor Kelnath, Chief Xenologist. Effective immediately, all hub personnel are relieved of council authority. We stand with the humans. Silence. Then a roar, human cheers, Etherian trills, even the low, resonant thrumming of the crystalline shard delegates who had quietly defected hours ago. Luravex appeared at the blister hatch, feathers fluffed in shock. Professor. Treason carries memory wipe and molecular dispersal. Kelnath met her gaze. Then let the record show I chose memory over cowardice. He turned to Thorne. Your 37 seconds. Will it be enough? Thorn grinned, the expression of a man who had already died 1,000 times in his head and kept getting back up. 37 seconds is eternity if you spend it right. The countdown began. On the main viewer, the council cruisers powered their primary lances, golden spears of annihilation warming in their housings. Kelneth felt the deck shudder as the first human ship initiated overload. A second followed, then a third. A chain of blooming white suns ignited across the migrant fleet, each one a willing sacrifice. For one heartbeat, the void went perfectly, terribly dark. Then every sensor on the council fleet went blind. In that darkness, the hub's rail batteries spoke for the first time in 3 centuries. Human engineers had rewired them in 9 hours using scavenged cabling and sheer spite. Zorathian gunners, his own students, fired with precision born of lifetimes of discipline now unleashed. Kinetic slugs the size of skyscrapers crossed the gap in silence and struck true. One council cruiser folded in half like paper, atmosphere venting in spiraling crystals. Another spun away trailing fire. The formation broke, discipline shattered by something they had never modeled, desperation made holy. Kelneth watched a human shuttle dart between the chaos, tractor beaming escape pods from a crippled council destroyer, saving the enemy. Of course they were. Thorn's voice came over the open channel, hoarse but triumphant. Welcome to Monday, motherfuckers. Kelneth felt it then, the brush of something vast and quiet, like a hand resting on the nape of the universe. Not luck, mercy, justice. The sense that every improbable second had been accounted for long before any of them drew breath. The remaining council ships began to retreat, shields flickering, pride wounded worse than hulls. But one cruiser refused to break off Vexar's flagship, the unyielding Mandate. It turned its scarred prow toward the hub, lance still glowing, intent on ramming if it could not conquer. Kelneth stared at the behemoth bearing down on them and felt no fear, only a strange, crystalline clarity. Thorn clapped him on the shoulder. Looks like we've got one more miracle to pull out of our ass. Kelneth bared his fangs in what might have been a smile, then let us be about it. Far below, in the chapel humans had improvised out of a storage bay, someone began to pray aloud. The words drifted through the ventilation, soft, defiant, unstoppable. And in the shadow of the charging juggernaut, the hub's patchwork army made ready to meet it, not with the certainty of victory, but with the absolute refusal to let the story end in silence. The unyielding Mandate filled the forward viewport like a moving mountain of obsidian and gold, its prow glowing with the accumulated charge of a lance meant to erase entire moons. Professor Kelneth stood on the emergency bridge, what had once been a botanical observation dome, now stripped of plants and filled with flickering consoles, the smell of scorched insulation, and the copper tang of blood. The deck vibrated with every impact as the Mandate's point defense guns raked the hub's outer ring. Somewhere 3 levels down, a human child was screaming. Somewhere closer, Luravex was singing an Etherian death hymn in a voice so steady it sounded like prayer. Kelnath's claws were sunk so deep into the tactical railing that the metal had begun to bend. His third eye, the one Zorathians kept politely closed in civilized company, was open wide, drinking in raw data from every surviving sensor. Numbers cascaded across his vision. Hull integrity 41%, power grid fluctuating, 37 seconds until the Mandate's lance reached critical. 37 again, the human's favorite impossible number. Captain Elias Thorn limped onto the dome beside him, left arm cradled in a makeshift sling, blood soaking the sleeve. His grin was gone, replaced by something harder, purer. Your people fight like poets, he said, voice hoarse from smoke. Mine fight like drunks in a bar brawl. Between us, we might just manage beautiful violence. Kelneth did not have the luxury of humor. The Mandate's lance will fire in 31 seconds. Our shields are paper. Have one rail battery left, and it is offline. We are finished. Thorn looked at him for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, battered book paper of all archaic things. He opened it to a page marked with a child's drawing of a rocket ship. My daughter gave me this before launch, said it was lucky. He tore the page out, folded it into a tight square, and pressed it into Kelneth's claw. Luck's a story we tell ourselves when the math runs out. Tonight we write a better one. Kelneth stared at the folded paper. He could feel the faint warmth of human skin still on it. Something in his chest, something he had long ago classified as vestigial, cracked open. He keyed the all-hands channel. This is Kelneth. All remaining power to the primary rail spine. Manual targeting only. We have one shot. A chorus of acknowledgments flooded back, Zorathian, Etherian, shard harmonics, and raw human voices braided together. Someone was laughing, someone else was crying. Someone was reciting the Lord's Prayer in Spanish while loading a magnetic coil with bare, bleeding hands. Thorn moved to the targeting station, shoving aside a dying technician with gentle reverence. I'm no gunner, he muttered, but I've played enough video games. Kelneth took the firing controls himself. The rail spine was ancient, designed to hurl asteroids, not warships. It had never been fired in anger. The capacitors screamed as they drank the last dregs of the hub's fusion heart. On the main scope, the mandate grew larger, until its golden lance was a second sun. 20 seconds. Thorn's voice, calm now, almost conversational. You know what I love about your species, Professor. You built all this beauty and order, and then you let us filthy entropy monkeys inside. That took faith. 10 seconds. Kelnath's claw hovered over the trigger. He saw, in that frozen instant, every equation he had ever loved unravel into something greater than prediction. He saw the paper rocket ship in his other hand. He saw the child who would never meet her father if they failed. He saw the quiet intelligence behind the stars that had guided a single golden record across a billion lonely kilometers until it found someone willing to listen. He did something no Zorathian had done in recorded history. He closed his third eye. He fired by feel. The rail's spine howled. The entire hub lurched as if kicked by a god. A solid tungsten slug the size of a city bus leapt out at 20% light speed, trailing a tail of ionized atmosphere like a comet. It struck the mandate dead center, just after the lance assembly. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the cruiser blossomed. Not an explosion, something quieter, more terrible. The lance overloaded, its containment failing in a chain reaction that rippled backward through the ship's core. Golden fire poured out of every seam, every viewport, every wound. The mandate folded in on itself, a dying star imploding into silence. The dome's audio pickups caught the last transmission from the enemy bridge, High Arbiter Vexar's voice, stripped of arrogance, almost wondering. Impossible deviation, recalculating, divine, static. The remaining council ships broke formation and fled, running from the wreckage of their certainty. Silence fell across the hub, broken only by the soft hiss of venting atmosphere and the distant, rising sound of human voices singing something old, something about amazing grace. Kelnath stood motionless, the crumpled drawing still clutched in his fist. He felt hollowed out, scoured clean, and for the first time in his life, absolutely certain of something he could not prove. Thorn slumped against the console, exhaustion claiming him. We just killed a god of order with a children's picture, he whispered, half laughing, half sobbing. Tell me that's not poetry. Kelnath opened his claw. The paper had been crushed into a tiny, perfect sphere by the force of his grip. He smoothed it against his chest plate. The crayon rocket ship was smudged but unbroken. Luravex glided in, feathers singed, eyes shining with something that looked suspiciously like faith. Professor, the fleet is retreating. We won. Kelnath looked past her to the shattered viewport, where the mandate's debris drifted like golden snow against the stars. Somewhere out there, new fleets would come, some in anger, some in curiosity. The galaxy had been cracked open and something wild and necessary was pouring through. He felt it again, that vast, quiet hand resting on the nape of creation. Not triumph, invitation. Thorn pushed himself upright, swaying. So what happens now, Professor Chaos? Kelnath met his gaze, and for the first time the title did not feel like an insult. Now, he said, voice rough with wonder, we find out what the universe looks like when it's allowed to grow up. Far below in the improvised chapel, the singing grew louder. Someone had found a battered guitar among the human belongings. The melody drifted through ruptured corridors and breached bulkheads, finding every survivor, alien and human alike. Kelnath listened, and the melody sounded like forgiveness. But deep in the sensor logs, unnoticed amid the celebration, a new signature stirred, cold, ancient, patient. It had watched the battle. It had measured the spike of ordered energy released when chaos and conviction collided. It was waking up, and it was hungry. The hub drifted in the aftermath like a broken cathedral, its rings cracked open to the stars, light spilling from 1,000 wounds. Emergency beacons strobed red across the debris field where the unyielding mandate had died, painting slow-motion spirals of frozen air and golden hull fragments. Professor Kelnath stood on what remained of the primary observation blister, the smart crystal now spider-webbed with fractures that turned the galaxy into a kaleidoscope. Cold vacuum kissed his scales where his suit had torn. He felt it as a kind of baptism. Below him, the survivors moved through the corridors with the dazed reverence of people who had watched the laws of physics bend just enough to let them live. Humans and aliens worked side by side without orders, patching hull breaches with whatever came to hand: prayer, duct tape, Zorathian lattice weave, Etherian song. Someone had scrawled across a bulkhead in dripping red coolant, "We are still here." Underneath, in careful Zorathian script, another hand had added, "And that is enough." Kelnath's claws still ached from the firing trigger. The crumpled crayon rocket ship was now sealed in a clear pocket over his heart, a ridiculous talisman that somehow weighed more than the station itself. Captain Elias Thorn found him there, moving carefully along the shattered deck plates. His left arm was in a proper med sling now, the bleeding staunched by a shard healer who had never treated warm-blooded tissue before and had wept crystalline tears when the human heartbeat steadied. "You look like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop," Thorn said quietly. Kelnath did not turn. In Zorathian, the phrase is waiting for the second law to reassert itself. Entropy always wins in the end. Thorn came to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder, staring out at the wreckage. "Funny, we have a saying too, God's not done with the story yet. Silence stretched between them, companionable and immense. Eventually Kelneth spoke, voice low. I closed my third eye when I fired. Do you understand what that means? For 3,000 cycles, no Zorathian has aimed a weapon without perfect calculation. I chose feeling. Faith, your disease infected me, Captain. Thorn's laugh was soft, almost shy. Welcome to the club. Membership dues are paid in miracles and bad coffee. A soft chime from the surviving sensor suite interrupted them. Luravex's voice, exhausted but precise. Professor, you should see this. Long-range array is picking up something. They moved together through half-lit corridors where gravity flickered like a dying candle. Crew members reached out as they passed, human hands clasping scaled forearms, Etherian wings brushing reptilian shoulders. No one spoke. Words felt too small. The auxiliary astrometrics lab was crowded with technicians of every species, their faces lit by the cold glow of the main holotank. At its center floated a single object, a perfect sphere of absolute blackness, 30,000 kilometers across, sitting just beyond the system's heliopause. It drank starlight. Sensors registered no mass, no energy signature, no radiation, only absence, and it was moving toward them, slowly. Inevitably, one of the younger human astronomers, a woman with a streak of dried blood across her cheek like war paint, whispered, "We're calling it the Hollow, because that's what it does. It hollows things out. There's a nebula on the far side that used to have 17 stars. Now there's just night." Kelneth felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees, though the environmental controls claimed otherwise. His tail curled tight against his leg. Thorn broke the silence. How long? 41 hours until it reaches the orbit of the outermost gas giant, Luravex answered. After that, projection models diverge. Some say the hub survives. Most say everything within a light year becomes mathematically undefined. Kelneth stared at the hollow and felt the old terror rise, the terror of a universe that could be unmade by something colder than entropy. Then he felt something else, something new. The memory of closing his third eye and still hitting a target across 1,000,000 kilometers. The memory of a child's drawing surviving a railgun recoil that should have vaporized it. He turned to the room. "We do not yet know what it is," he said, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had killed certainty and lived. "But we know what we are." A ripple went through the gathered beings, human spines straightening, Etherian feathers lifting, shard lattices brightening. They were exhausted, bleeding, half-mad with grief and triumph, and every single one of them looked ready to do it all again. Thorn rested a hand on Kelneth's shoulder. 41 hours. Think we can improvise a miracle that big?" Kelneth looked once more at the hollow, at the impossible absence sliding toward them like the edge of a closing book. Then he looked at the people around him, at the human who had sung lullabies while welding death, at the Etherian who had learned to pray in a human tongue, at the shard who now carried a crucifix etched into its crystalline chest. He thought of the quiet intelligence that had guided a paper rocket ship through his fist and into legend. "No," he said, and the word tasted like beginning. "Think we can improvise something better." In the improvised chapel 3 decks down, someone began to play the guitar again. The notes drifted up through ruptured vents and broken Jeffries tubes, finding every corner of the dying station. More voices joined, some in languages no one else understood, some wordless. The song rose like warm smoke through cold vacuum. Kelneth listened, and for the first time in his long and orderly life, he did not try to calculate the probability of survival. He simply believed the next verse was coming. Far away, the hollow accelerated just slightly, as if it too had heard the music and wanted a closer look. And in the dark between stars, something vast and patient turned a page. 41 hours. The countdown pulsed in red across every surviving screen on the hub, a heartbeat made of numbers. 41 hours until the hollow swallowed the light of Epsilon Eridani's outermost moon and began its final approach. 41 hours until the universe tested whether chaos and conviction together could do more than merely survive. Professor Kelneth had not slept. None of them had. Sleep felt like treason. The central atrium, once a serene garden of bioluminescent ferns and floating meditation orbs, had become a war room cathedral. Shattered crystal from the dome above hung suspended in the low gravity like frozen lightning, catching the light of welding torches and emergency lanterns. Humans had strung Christmas lights scavenged from a colony ship across the broken girders. Someone had chalked on the wall in 3 languages, "This is what hope looks like when it's out of breath." Kelneth stood at the heart of the chaos, scales dulled with soot, the crayon rocket ship still sealed over his chest like a medal from a war no one had declared yet. Around him, representatives of a dozen species formed a circle that should never have existed. Commander Rays of the Exodus fleet, eyes bloodshot but fierce. Luravex, her left wing in a cast made from human carbon fiber and Etherian silk. Shard Delegate Kale 9, its crystalline body now threaded with copper wire and prayer beads. A hivemind drone that had cut itself free from the collective and named itself Elijah, after a human prophet it had read about in a children's Bible. A dozen more, all breathing the same thin, recycled air, all carrying the same impossible deadline. Kelnath raised his voice, and the atrium quieted as if the station itself leaned in to listen. "We have one advantage the hollow does not possess," he said. "It is perfect absence. We are imperfect presence. And presence, messy, singing, bleeding, praying presence, is the only thing the records show has ever pushed back true nothingness." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, part agreement, part prayer, part laughter that had forgotten how to be polite. Commander Reyes stepped forward. "We've got 37 ships that can still fly. Half of them are held together by spit and scripture. We've got every physicist, theologian, and lunatic engineer in the system working on theories that would make a sane person weep. Bottom line, we think we can seed the hollow with a chained resonance cascade, basically scream at it with every frequency of hope we can generate, but we need a conductor, someone to carry the signal inside." Silence. Then Captain Thorne spoke from the back, voice raw. "I'll pilot the Lance ship." Every head turned. Thorne stood leaning against a bulkhead, pale from blood loss, but his eyes were steady. "I've got the most experience flying by the seat of my pants." And he tapped the place over his heart where a photograph of his daughter was taped inside his suit. "I've got the best reason." Kelnath felt the protest rise in his throat. No, not him, not the one human who had taught him the taste of faith. But Thorne met his gaze and shook his head once, gentle but final. Reyes nodded. "Then it's settled. The rest of us build the choir." The next 30 hours dissolved into a blur of sacred madness. Humans taught Etherians to sing in 4-part harmony while welding gravitic coils. Shard crystals learned to vibrate at the exact frequency of a human heartbeat. Elijah the X-drone composed a canticle in 12-dimensional mathematics that translated roughly to "I was many, now I am one, and I choose love." Someone found an ancient Zorathian resonance bell in the archives, MEANT Chinese letter FOR funeral rites, and rewired it to ring at the precise pitch of the Lord's Prayer in Old Latin. Kelnath walked among them, no longer the detached observer. He carried cables. He held a dying human's hand while medics worked. He listened as Luravex confessed, trembling, that she had begun praying to the human god because he seems to answer even when the math says he shouldn't. At hour 29, the fleet formed up 37 ships in a perfect spiral, engines tuned to a single harmonic. The hub itself became the final instrument, every surviving power conduit, every patched hull plate, every voice in every corridor singing the same rising note. Kelnath stood with Thorne on the bridge of the Lance ship, an old human ore hauler renamed Amazing Grace. The cockpit smelled of coffee, ozone, and the faint sweetness of the incense someone had lit in the cargo hold. Thorne handed Kelnath a small comm bead. "When you give the word, the choir sings. I'll ride the wavefront straight into the hollow's heart. If your theory's right, the resonance will overload whatever passes for its nervous system. If you're wrong," he shrugged. "Well, I've had worse Mondays." Kelnath's claw closed around the bead. "Elias, I have run the numbers 1,000 ways. The probability of your survival is..." Thorne placed a finger against the professor's snout, gentle as a blessing. "Stop calculating, my friend, start believing." The fleet reached the rendezvous point. The hollow filled half the sky now, a hole in reality so complete that stars on the far side simply ceased to exist. It made no sound. It cast no shadow. It simply was not. Kelnath looked out at the spiral of ships, human, Zorathian, Etherian, Shard, Hivemind, all glowing with the same soft gold of overloaded shields singing in harmony. He saw children's drawings taped to consoles. He saw aliens with tears freezing on their faces. He saw a universe that had decided, against all reason, to stand together. He pressed the comm bead. "Now," he said, and the choir began. The sound that poured from 37 ships in one broken station was not music as any species had ever defined it. It was grief and joy braided together. It was every lullaby, every war cry, every psalm and lament and love song ever torn from desperate throats. It rose in a perfect, impossible crescendo, human voices layered over Etherian harmonics, shard crystals ringing like cathedral bells, the deep drone of a hivemind that had learned to say Amen. The Lance ship leapt forward on a wave of pure resonance, engines dark, riding the sound itself like a surfer rides a tsunami of grace. Inside the cockpit, Thorne laughed, the sound of a man who had finally come home. Kelnath watched the grace vanish into the hollow's perfect black, carrying with it every note of hope the galaxy had left. For one eternal second, nothing happened. Then the hollow flinched. A ripple small at first, then violent, tore across its surface. Cracks of white fire spider webbed through the darkness. The absence began to sing back, a counter-melody of pure negation. Kelnath's heart stopped. On every screen, in every corridor, the choir faltered. And in that moment of failing courage, a single new frequency joined the song, raw human, coming from inside the hollow itself. Thorne's voice, calm and close your eyes and filled with wonder. "Hey, Professor, you were right. There's something here, something beautiful. Tell my daughter, tell her daddy found the light." The hollow shattered, not with an explosion, but with a birth cry. Light, not the cold light of stars, but something warmer, golden, alive, poured out of the wound like dawn breaking inside midnight. The absence unraveled, thread by thread, until there was nothing left but a newborn nebula of soft pink and gold, already birthing protostars. The fleet hung silent, stunned beyond weeping. Kelnath floated in the ruins of the bridge, the crayon rocket ship glowing faintly against his chest as if lit from within. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried, the first sound of a universe learning how to hope again. But deep in the new nebula, something vast and ancient stirred, something that had slept inside the hollow for longer than galaxies. It had tasted the song. It had felt the resonance of imperfect, defiant, loving souls, and it was no longer content to sleep. It opened eyes that had never known light, and it began to move. The newborn nebula hung before the fleet like a rose opening in slow motion, soft pinks and golds swirling where absolute blackness had reigned moments before. It was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen and the most terrifying, because it was breathing. Professor Kelnath stood on the shattered bridge of the hub, one claw pressed to the cracked viewport, the other clutching the comm bead that had gone silent the instant Thorn's voice became light. The crayon rocket ship over his heart glowed with a gentle, steady pulse now, as though it had decided to keep beating for both of them. Every screen in the fleet showed the same impossible readings. Mass, negative. Energy signature, infinite yet benevolent. Gravitational lensing, bending toward hope. The nebula was not a cloud of gas. It was an organism, older than entropy, older than time, and it was waking up because 37 broken ships in one broken station had sung a lullaby loud enough to reach whatever passed for its dreams. Luravex's feathers trembled against his shoulder. "Professor, it's looking at us." She was right. Two vast golden eyes, each larger than a moon, opened slowly at the nebula's heart. They were not cruel. They were not kind. They were simply awake, and in their waking was the weight of every story the universe had ever tried to tell. Kelnath felt the gaze settle on him the way sunrise settles on a cemetery, gentle, inevitable, and final. Commander Reyes' voice crackled across the fleet channel, hoarse with awe. "All ships, hold position. Do not repeat, do not fire." That thing just ate a hole in reality and turned it into a garden. I'm pretty sure weapons are rude. A low, resonant chord rolled through every hull, not sound, but meaning made audible. It translated in 100 languages at once into a single sentence that every mind heard in the voice of someone they had loved and lost. "You woke me with a song of becoming. Now sing the next verse." Kelnath's tail went still. The comm bead in his claw flickered, then lit with a faint, familiar heartbeat. Thorn's voice, impossible, alive, threaded with wonder, and something ancient that had never been human, spoke from inside the nebula itself. "Hey, Professor, you still there?" Kelnath's throat closed. "Elias, you are, still me, mostly. Little extra reverb now. A soft laugh like galaxies colliding. The hollow wasn't empty, Kel, it was a seed, and we just watered it with everything we had. Turns out the universe has been waiting for someone stupid enough to love it out loud." The golden eyes pulsed once patiently. Thorn continued, quieter. "It needs a name, something to grow into. The old ones called it the engine of becoming. I think it likes that. But it also needs gardeners, stewards, people willing to keep singing when the math says shut up." Kelnath looked out at the fleet, at the patched hulls, the exhausted faces, the children pressed to viewports watching a god open its eyes. He looked at the crayon rocket ship glowing like a coal against his chest. He understood. The hollow had not been the enemy. It had been the question, is the universe still worth finishing? And humanity, flawed, loud, praying, laughing, bleeding humanity, had answered with 37 ships and one impossible note. Kelnath keyed the all-fleet channel. His voice did not shake. "This is Professor Kelnath of the Galactic Sociological Research Hub. Effective immediately, the quarantine on humanity is revoked. Effective immediately, the Galactic Council is dissolved. We have been handed a garden larger than imagination, and the only qualification required is the willingness to tend it." A pause, then Reyes, laughing through tears, seconded, all in favor. The fleet's reply was not words. It was the choir again, softer now, reverent. A single sustained note that made the newborn stars flare brighter. The engine of becoming answered with a warm wind of ionized gold that kissed every hull, sealing breaches, easing pain, writing forgiveness across scarred metal. Where the light touched, wounds closed. Where the light lingered, old enemies embraced without knowing why. Kelnath felt the crayon drawing unfold on its own, smoothing itself against his chest until the rocket ship pointed toward the golden eyes. A child's voice, Thorn's daughter, somehow carried across light years, whispered through every speaker at once. "Daddy says hi. He says the stars are prettier from the inside. He says bring cookies." The nebula laughed, an avalanche of joy that birthed 1,000 new suns. Kelnath closed all three of his eyes and, for the first time in his life, prayed not to equations, not to probability, but to the vast and quiet intelligence that had apparently been waiting for someone to notice the garden needed weeding. When he opened them again, the engine had extended a single tendril of living starlight toward the fleet, gentle, curious, inviting. Thorn's voice, warm and close as breath. "Come on, Professor. The next verse is a duet, and I saved you a seat." Kelnath stepped forward, the viewport irised open before him, atmosphere held back by nothing more than the engine's gentle regard. Vacuum did not rush in. Instead, the golden wind lifted him. cradled him, carried him out into the newborn light. Behind him, the fleet followed, human, Zorathian, Etherian, Shard, Hivemind, all of them stepping into the embrace of something older than fear and younger than hope. The last thing the old galaxy saw was 37 broken ships and one broken station vanishing into a dawn that had no night. And somewhere in a cradle of newborn stars, a little girl's crayon rocket finally reached the edge of the page, only to discover the paper had grown wings. But deeper still, in the place where the engine's heart beat slowest, something that had slept even longer than the hollow stirred again. It had tasted the song. It had felt the gardeners arrive. And for the first time in 13 billion years, it was afraid, because the gardeners carried fire, and they knew how to sing. The garden had no edges. That was the first thing Professor Kelneth understood when the golden wind set him down on a plain of living starlight. There were no horizons, only gentle curves of rose-gold nebular grass that rose and fell like breathing. Overhead, constellations rearranged themselves into shapes that hurt to remember and healed to behold. Rivers of liquid diamond sang in chords older than language, and everywhere, the scent of rain on Earth's soil after a long war. He was not alone. Thorn stood waiting, barefoot on the stargrass, unchanged except for eyes that now held the slow turning of galaxies. The scar on his left arm was gone. The exhaustion was gone. Only the crooked, human grin remained. "Told you I'd save you a seat," he said, and his voice was still his own, yet it carried the undertone of a billion others who had ever dared to hope. Kelneth looked down at his claws. The crayon rocket ship had become part of him, inked into his scales in lines of soft gold that pulsed with every beat of his hearts. He flexed his hand, half expecting the drawing to flake away. It did not. It was as permanent as mercy. Around them the others arrived, Ray's laughing like a child, Luravex spinning in delighted spirals, her broken wing whole again, Elijah the X-drone weeping single perfect tears that fell upward and became new moons. Children ran past, human and alien, chasing fireflies made of pure melody. Someone had brought the battered guitar. Someone else had brought cookies. Kelneth felt laughter rise in his chest, actual laughter, not the calculated hiss he had once mistaken for it. The sound startled him. It sounded like beginning. Thorn clapped him on the shoulder. "Come on, there's someone you need to meet." They walked, no, they simply intended to walk, and the garden moved beneath them until they stood at the heart of the engine of becoming. It had taken the shape of an immense tree, its trunk a slow tornado of light, its branches the birth of galaxies. At its roots lay every cradle that had ever rocked a child, every grave that had ever received a hero, every altar where someone had whispered, "I still believe." And beneath the tree sat a man, not in the way mortals sit, he was sitting the way forgiveness sits, the way dawn sits on the edge of night. Simple robes the color of deep water, hands scarred, eyes that had cried every tear ever shed and still chose joy. He was turning the pages of a book bound in living leather, and every page he turned became a new world. He looked up as they approached, and his smile was the reason the speed of light is exactly what it is. "Elias," he said, voice gentle as bread broken for strangers, "you brought my friend." Thorn's grin softened into something reverent. "Told him you'd want to meet the one who finally closed his third eye." Kelneth found himself kneeling without deciding to. Words in old Zorathian, words he had never been taught, spilled from his mouth. "I was blind with numbers. I measured everything and understood nothing." The man closed the book. The sound of it was every door that ever opened for the prodigal. "You measured what could be weighed," he said. "Love refuses scales, yet here you are." He reached out and touched the golden rocket ship on Kelneth's chest. Light flared, warm as childhood summers. "Your chaos," the man said, "was never the problem. It was the invitation. Every time you broke, you made room for me." Kelneth's vision blurred, an impossibility for Zorathian physiology, yet here were tears. And the hollow, the fear that woke beneath it. The man's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with ancient sorrow. "There is another garden older than this one. A tree there still bears fruit of a different kind. Some roots run deeper than even I choose to force. Free will is a terrifying gift." He stood and the tree responded, branches lowering until they formed a bridge of light leading away through the garden and beyond it, into places the newborn stars had not yet named. "The song you sang woke both life and its opposite. The gardeners are needed now more than ever. Will you keep singing, even when the next verse is minor key?" Kelneth rose. The fear was still there, the cold, ancient thing that had tasted their fire and learned terror, but it felt small now, the way childhood monsters shrink in morning light. He looked at Thorn, at Ray's laughing with a shard child on her shoulders, at Luravex teaching Elijah to whistle, at every impossible soul who had refused to let the story end in silence. He looked at the man who was mending the universe one broken heart at a time. "I spent my life trying to quarantine chaos," Kelneth said. "Turns out the quarantine was the disease." The man laughed, and galaxies were born in the sound. "Then go," he said, opening his scarred hands. "The garden is large, and there are still corners where night thinks it has won. Take the fire, take the song, take one another." He placed something small in Kelneth's palm, a seed pulsing with the same gold as the rocket ship. Plant this wherever darkness forgets it can be loved back into shape. Kelnath closed his fist around it. When he opened it again, the seed was gone, but every scale on his body now bore a tiny golden star. Thorn bumped his shoulder. Ready for the next impossible Monday, Professor Chaos. Kelnath bared his fangs in a grin that no Zorathian archivist would ever recognize. Lead the way, Captain Entropy. They turned toward the Bridge of Light. Behind them, the choir began again, softer now, a traveling song. Millions of voices, billions, rising from every throat that had ever chosen hope over certainty. The man watched them go, smiling the way fathers smile when children finally outgrow the need for training wheels. And somewhere, far beyond the newborn stars, something ancient and cold heard the footsteps of gardeners approaching, carrying fire, carrying cookies, carrying a love that had already conquered death once and was willing to do it again. It tried to hide, but the song was already inside it. The garden had no edges, and the gardeners were coming. The story was not finished. It had only just learned how to sing in harmony.